Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's long-range technical forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. This analysis is being provided for perspective only, and any decision made based upon this presentation is the sole responsibility of the person making the decision. Finally, please remember that all long-range weather forecasting is speculative by nature. We're going to start here with a satellite animation from Ghost 16, and in the near term there are two features we got to watch out for. Hurricane Zeta, which we'll talk about in a moment, and the cutoff low just to its north and west. As the sun was rising here, look at the snowpack that is here in parts of the north central plains stretching up into Montana and eventually into the Canadian Rockies. At the end of the video, we're going to be talking about the importance of understanding the snow extent across the northern hemisphere as we work our way into the month of November. But in the near term, the cutoff low that's here is going to be slowly moving toward the Ohio River Valley, and it's going to be using quite a bit of the moisture on the northern edge of Hurricane Zeta, which will produce a widespread flooding threat here across a broad sector here of the southern and southeastern part of the United States, including up here in the Tennessee and Ohio valleys. Now, Zeta will, by later on this evening, already be cutting into this region just to the east of New Orleans, but it's going to move very, very quickly after that. So looking at our all hazards weather map here, we can see that the cutoff low still on the back side here. We have ice storm warnings in this area, winter storm warnings here, winter weather advisories, and a blizzard warning on the back side of this in parts of New Mexico. As this spreads to the east, we're going to be seeing flood threat moving through parts of southern Missouri and over into the Ohio River Valley. And then at that point, we're going to start talking about where the flooding rains from Zeta will be going through. So Zeta's main track will be right in through this area, but you notice that the National Hurricane Center is extended very far inland, the risk for tropical storm force winds in addition to the flooding problem that we're going to be seeing from this particular system. So it will be a hurricane category, probably a category 1, possibly a category 2 strength hurricane at landfall. Its max sustained winds this afternoon at 1 p.m. We're at 100 miles an hour. This again is Central Time. But notice the S's, okay? That means we expect this thing to keep its tropical storm strength pretty far inland before it transitions into an extratropical system. And the European model's got a really tight envelope here in terms of its ensemble members on its eventual path. Now I want to take a look at the latest data we have in terms of total accumulated precipitation. And what we've got here is the combined systems coming through parts of the southeastern United States. Now we will find an area right in through here where we are expecting to get anywhere between maybe 3 to 6 inches of rainfall. There'll be another corridor right in through there where the cutoff low moves through that also has the potential for 2 to 4, maybe 5 inches of rain. The trickiest areas to forecast are going to be right in through here on where the southern or southeastern edge of the heavy rainfall is going to be for parts of the Carolinas getting down into Georgia. And then also right here, this has been slowly moving toward the south, the northern edge of the heavy rain. And therefore, it looks like if you're south of I-70, that's going to be the best chances for heavy rain. But to the north of it, there's a chance we miss a lot of this. So the other threat of this system I want to talk about are the winds. And we've seen a lot of the models over the last 24 hours start to really extend the extent of the stronger winds much farther inland. And you can see that possibly making landfall here with wind speeds around 100 miles an hour, possibly faster. But this corridor right in through here, we may see tropical storm force winds. That means those winds getting up to about 74 miles an hour, pushing all the way into the Appalachian Mountains and eventually toward parts of the mid-Atlantic. And that's going to produce an extra threat much farther inland than many of our other systems. And it's kind of part of the reason why this system is moving so very, very quickly. So let's talk about why it's going to do that. The steering currents come from two components. One, there is a high pressure cell that's sitting here off the southeast coast of the United States. Our cutoff lows on the back side. So both of these are going to be sending Zeta very quickly right through the chute here over toward the Appalachian Mountains after going through the Tennessee Valley. The cutoff low, though, is truly cut off. There's the main flow of the jet stream. And the big question remains, are we going to continue to see patterns like this evolve as we progress through the end of October, but really into November? And that's some of the stuff I want to address in the longer range outlook here. First, over the last 6 days, though, the snow that has spread from this cutoff low has been impressive. So let me just take you back to the weekend snowfall amounts. That's what you're looking at here. And as that snow spread through parts of Montana and Wyoming and parts of the high plains in Nebraska and South Dakota, we saw some scenes like this. This is from the Wyoming Department of Transportation here, showing you the very deep winter-like scene of the snow blowing here across the highways in parts of Wyoming. Now, over the last 3 days, as the cutoff low has then moved through parts of Arizona over toward New Mexico, the snow that spread through parts of Colorado and New Mexico and into the panhandle of panhandle of Texas and Oklahoma has been quite heavy at times, and that's why one of the reasons why we still have the blizzard warning in this area. But the ice that's been out ahead of this in this part of Texas and Oklahoma has really produced an historic ice storm event. Even though the soil temperatures were still above freezing, the trees were able to get down below freezing, and you can see the damage done here on the OU campus. Just incredible to see that. Over the next week, this is what we're expecting in terms of snow. As our cutoff low still sits here and spins, we do have to be on the outlook for the rest of today and into early tomorrow morning for more snow to accumulate. Pinning down the amounts here is going to be very difficult, as we're going to have a quick transition over to rain on this side of the system. There's a little clipper system I'll talk to you about in a few moments. It's going to be sneaking through here, possibly increasing chances of snow in southern Saskatchewan, North Dakota, getting over into Minnesota. And early on Friday morning, we have to be on the lookout here for some possible snow in parts of the Northeast. But from there, let's just step back again and look at the next week's worth of precip. This is the European, and this is the GFS. Overall, very good model agreement. And I'll tell you this, once the cutoff low and Zeta get out, we're going to have several drier days here in the midsection of the country as large ridging starts to build in. So let's talk about that. Now, as we watch this animation, let's see first where these first couple of pieces are moving. We notice that by the time we get into tomorrow afternoon, the upper level low, the cutoff right here, is the more dominant feature, and just sitting out ahead of it, somewhere right in here, is where Zeta is going to be. All right, so that pulls on through. Now notice the ridge that comes in behind this. That ridge is going to bring in higher atmospheric pressure. That ridge is going to bring in warmer conditions. But we do have to watch right here on Saturday and Sunday, this trough sneak through. And that's a trough I'm going to watch carefully to bring in a little clipper system right here across this section of the U.S. and Canada. And then that trough dips down into the eastern part of the U.S. as we get into Monday and into Tuesday. My concern for Monday into Tuesday is the possibility of getting a frost pretty far to the south here, maybe through parts of Virginia and into the Piedmont toward the higher elevations in parts of North Carolina. So we're going to watch out for that. But again, look at how we get into next week, and there's broad ridging here as the trough really becomes established across the Canadian archipelago over toward Alaska and Greenland. And that's where the jet stream is going to go. It's going to retreat north. So warmth will come back in for this time of year, and this will be drier. Now, what we're watching as we get out here toward the end of this animation is that by the time we get to November 6th, 7th, 8th, that time frame, the operational European is really trying to drop in another deep trough coming out of parts of like Alberta and Saskatchewan on the leeward side of the mountain chain in the west. And that's important to understand. Let me show you what the European ensemble says about this. So now we're looking at 51 different simulations put together. That trough still exists, but look at the large upstream ridges here in Alaska and the downstream ridge that's over the central U.S. This will be drier in this area and warmer, but we need to see where this trough comes digging in. That's what's going to be critical. Because going from day 10 out to day 15, if that trough develops, I want you to know something. It's coming from here, not coming from the Gulf of Alaska. And that's going to be critical for the West Coast, for California. Because when troughs swing in like this, then we get lots of precipitation. But when they come in from the north or northeast, it brings in the cold. So we get snows up on the mountains, but it pushes on the leeward side of the mountains rather than on the windward. So the things I have to be asking myself, we watch this area closely for high latitude blocking. That means ridging building in this area. And over the next 7 days, we've got a lot of troughing there, hence the relaxation of the pattern. But if heights start to build there again, I want to know about it and see if these models have this right. Secondly, this is the area I don't think any model actually knows what's going on. We see here that everything kind of averages out to zonal flow, but I'm concerned that we could redevelop more troughing in that area, which could reinforce maybe some colder shots of air into the middle part of the month of November. I'll show what I mean in just a few moments. First, I have the European model week 2 precip here on the right, and on the left I have the GFS. Overall, where do we see the heavier precipitation? Well, as that trough comes diving through, you can see it's going to be pushing up against the lee side of the mountains. This could be a situation where we do build up some more snowpack here in the Intermountain West. But the problem is going to be the West Coast. With that trough not coming in from the Gulf of Alaska, we're not bringing in the strong onshore flow, and we continue to have our drought problems for parts of Oregon and Washington moving forward. Meanwhile, with the broader ridge that's extending here over the east, it could be a drier time period. Wild cards are going to be down here in the tropics. Will something emerge out of, the Caribbean. Well, we noticed that the European model was trying to put something down there, but it's still going to have to be something we watch day by day to see if something develops. So let's talk temperatures. Minimum temperatures through the next 7 days first. Now, very cold air still around that cutoff low, but watch it as things change as they go from Wednesday into Thursday and Friday. We do see moderation starting to happen from west to east once we get into the weekend. But as that broader trough develops across the east, I'm now starting to get concerned, not necessarily Saturday or Sunday, but watch right in through this area as I go through the day on Sunday. Here we go. That's Sunday morning. Now watch Monday morning and Tuesday morning. I'm going to watch very carefully this region to see if we do get our first frost of the year. This is a very agriculturally productive area in through here. So we need to watch because that would be close to on time, but something I want to keep an eye on. Notice how there's warmth that's returning to this section of the U.S. And we can see that even when we look out in the day 5 through 10 time period. Both the GFS, which is on the left, and the European, which is on the right, it's allowing that warmth to expand while the troughing really occupies much of northern Canada. Remember, the jet stream retreated north. But an interesting transition in the latest model runs now have this for the day 10 through 15. So what are we talking about? This is now going from like November the 7th or 8th all the way out to the 12th. And at that time, we start to see the reinforcement of some cooler air coming back into this area. And we saw it last time come out just like that. Now that tends to keep the East Coast warmer, as you can see here, and also the Southwest could stay warm, but I want to watch for where that storehouse of cold air sets up this time of year to see if we let it out once again, once we get past the first week of the new month. Now, the factors controlling this are many and varied. We're going to start with La Nina first. Our La Nina continues to strengthen. Ocean temperatures are now down there at 1.5 degrees Celsius below average. And so therefore, this is a robust and quite healthy La Nina, which has had up to this point very strong trade winds. But things have been changing a bit. The Southern Oscillation Index, which reached a peak here, back at the middle of October, has since been coming down. Now, it's still very much La Nina-like, but this just tells me that temporarily those trade winds are starting to change a bit once you get over into the western side of the Western Pacific. And with that change, you see these warm colors right in through here? That would indicate stronger westerly winds, which are increasing the momentum in the tropics. And that would be very characteristic of a drop in the Southern Oscillation Index. So you say, why? Well, it's been the MJO. So remember, in the tropics, we're watching not only El Nino, La Nina, but there's the Indian Ocean dipole, and then sitting on top of it is the Madden-Julian Oscillation, the MJO. Now, I want to take a moment and teach you a little bit about this because I got some great questions about it, so here we go. The MJO was right here for a long time, phase 4 and 5. Now, where is that? Do you see the blues on this figure? This figure goes back in time from today back to September 28th. Those blues represent where there were strong winds out of the east. Those are our trade winds. See the reds? Those are westerly winds. Now this is near the surface. So everything was colliding, if you just see right in through here. And that sits right in this area. That is phase 4 to phase 5. Okay? Now over the next couple of weeks, the trade winds are changing up a little bit, shifting around, and the westerly wind bursts have backed off as well. And that's because the MJO is now in phase 6 and is forecast to come around into phase 7, 8, and maybe over into phase 1. Now to help understand that, I threw in a diagram over here on the left. Whenever we talk about the phase of the MJO, it's always about just where the heaviest rainfall is, where the best convection, where the air is rising across this region in the tropics from Eastern Africa out into the central Pacific Ocean. So for example, on this diagram, you can see that all the upward motion and therefore the rain is around phase 2, 3. Well, look up here. Phase 2 and 3 indicate heavy rainfall in that area. Now, where our MJO has been for a while has been over here in phase 4 and 5, and that's this area. Therefore, much of the heavy precipitation has been locked in right here around Indonesia, which it has been very wet. It's now moving out of phase 5 toward phase 6 and 7, and it typically does that. It typically moves like this and then does a reset and comes back over and moves like that again. As it goes toward phase 7, 8, and 1, this might be problematic for South America. You see, in the near term, that's going to be bringing in the heavier precipitation. But if it resets after going to phase 1 and comes back into phase 4 and 5, that's a drier time period for South America. And I'm going to show you that in just a few moments here. But first, let's look at it another way. You see, as we see the MJO move, it's right here now in phase 6 and 7, okay? It's going to reset and come back over here to phase 1, 2, and 3. That's going to put the rising motion here and here. This is why I'm watching the Caribbean very carefully over the next couple of weeks for more tropical cyclone development. This is also why, at least over the next week or so, we're getting outstanding upper level motion over parts of South America, leading to the very heavy rainfall here. In a nutshell, the MJO is basically making it easier for the Brazilian monsoon to transport moisture and make a lot of rain. But if the MJO goes back into phase 4 and 5, this region will go over dry again, and it'll get wetter farther to the south. So this is what I'm watching. Come back over here to the figure that's on the right. I would imagine the MJO's got one of two different choices here, and I put two dark arrows to show what I mean. I want to focus first on this one. I'll draw a blue arrow toward it so you can see it. If the MJO comes briefly into phase 6, 7, and then curls after going into 8 back into the null space, which is here, and pops back out over into phase 4 or 5, Brazil's going to go back over to a drier pattern, and that La Nina is going to take back over, and so will the trade winds. But if the MJO does this, I'll draw it in green, stays way out here, see this other arrow? If it ends up doing that and stays out in that area, that would mean it's going to sweep through phase 8, 1, and 2 at higher amplitude, which means getting away from the middle of the diagram. So what might that mean for the temperatures across North America? Well, phase 8 is up there in the right. That's the phase we're heading to. That's the warmer, generally correlated to warmer conditions. But as it goes into phase 1 and phase 2, we would rebuild the cooler air here and let it come out, at least historically, if the MJO does that. So that's why we think as we go into the second week of November, there's the possibility of another shot at cooler air. There's at least a couple of things that are lining up there. Now, are the models picking up on that? Well, this would be the November 9th through the 16th time period. And you can see the colder air in both the GFS on the left and the European on the right. My question is, how far will this come out of Canada down here? The likelihood of keeping this section of the United States warm, I think, is relatively high. But I think we could see, once we get into November, a good shot middle of the month of some cold air that comes into that area. I think the models maybe just have a little bit too warm of a bias across the central United States. Now, why they probably have that is La Nina tends to keep this whole area warmer as we go into the month of November. I'll show you that in just a few moments. But if the cold air does come out like that and then rebounds here, this is going to be the area that has a better chance at being wetter than normal, as does parts of the Pacific Northwest through the Rocky Mountains. The problem is there's no strong evidence of a subtropical jet developing, which is what's still keeping parts of California on the drier side of things as we move to mid-November. That would be about 45 days late in getting the moisture to return to California. Now, here's the other piece of this I'd like to start discussing with you. You see, we've talked about the MJO, we've talked about the EPO, the North Atlantic Oscillation, the Arctic Oscillation, and La Nina. But there's another thing to think about here, and it's some research that I'm not too familiar with, but a lot of my colleagues are. It's Northern Hemisphere snow cover. So that map you're looking at over there on the left, you see these colors? That's where through yesterday we had more than normal snow cover. These colors would be less than normal for this time of year. You see, as it turns out, the extent of the Northern Hemisphere snow cover has an important relationship with the polar vortex and also the jet stream. Now, we're going to see this area here shrink. It's going to go away. And the reason why, we're bringing in warmer conditions there. In fact, I could probably extend that even farther to the north, which means we're going to back off on this major positive anomaly we have. But what I want to show you here is that looking historically, from 2012 to 2019, we had several years in a row with well above average snow cover across the Northern Hemisphere in October. And there was another time period right back here, 87 and 92, where we didn't. And I just want to look at it. Let's just look at it together to see if we can make some sense of this. So 87 to 92. In those years, I saw a very highly amplified jet stream. I'll kind of draw it out for us here. It tended to do something like this. And because of that, we would get a lot of cold air that would come in through here, big ridging out west, dry along the west, but an active storm track in the central part of the United States. Okay? The years where we didn't have that, November and December of 2012 through 2019, well, they tended to have big ridges here around the Gulf of Alaska, and the jet stream stayed pretty far to the north and did something a bit more like that. And that's something we've seen lately. Let me throw another monkey wrench into this analysis. When you look at the temperature patterns, you can see the cold here versus the warm of the recent years, so 2012 to 2019 versus 87 and 92. But the one thing that's really bothering me is that 2012 is an interesting year to compare to 2020 because right now 2020 just surpassed 2012 as having the lowest Arctic sea ice extent, which also has an impact on the the polar jet stream and the polar vortex. I know it may feel like as though I'm casting a little bit of doubt on the longer range forecasts, but at this point I see several moving pieces with the MJO, La Nina, also the change in northern hemisphere snow cover, plus this lack of Arctic sea ice. And in the background state of all of that, what we've got is when you compare a normal La Nina November, it tends to be warmer in this area with much of the cold tucked away up here. So we have to add all these things together and watch them week by week as they evolve. And what will be important to understand, especially in tomorrow's video, is how this is going to affect South America in the near term, which a lot of attention is being put on them right now. I'll bring it all to you again in the morning. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you then. Thank you.